Okay, good morning, everyone. Maria, are we good on the recording? Oh, yes, I see it. Never mind. Sorry. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Nikki Hernandez. I am the outreach coordinator for the Colorado Address Confidentiality Program. So I'm here today to talk about what our program can do for supporting survivors, but we're going to dive into some more details than we usually do in a regular application assistant training. So I really want people, if they have questions, to use that chat box. We will make sure that we address those questions and just whatever it is that you've come up against in your own experience supporting survivors, or anything you want to know if you're not as familiar, would be helpful for me to make sure I'm answering the questions that you all have. So just quickly before I get started, if people are able to use the raise hand option, that way I can see who is an application assistant already. That would be just good information for me to know. Let's see. Now I have to figure out how I can actually see that. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yes, Liz, I see. Erica, Vida, I know you're an application assistant. Mary Gay. Looks like a handful of you are application assistants. So if that is the case, you can use this to renew, whether you need to renew soon or not. You can complete the paperwork at the end of the training. And once I get that, we'll start you fresh with your certification from today, so you don't have to worry about it for another 2 years. Awesome. That being said, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so the agenda for today is to give an overview. Again, if you are already an application assistant, this part will be a little bit of a review for you of the creation and purpose of the program. We'll then go into really looking at the eligibility in terms of the statutory requirements, as well as common myths that people have about whether someone is eligible to enroll or not. So we want those myths to be debunked so people are aware of how this program can support more people than you might have originally thought. Next is the use of the substitute address. So again, this is going to be a little bit more detailed than our normal training, where we will talk about specific procedures for state and local government agencies. We'll talk about private companies a little bit more. We'll cover that real property, as I mentioned in the webinar description. So making sure to address all the things I put in there. And then the last part will be for if you want to renew your certification or get designated as an application assistant. That portion will be more committed to what that process looks like, going through the application, and just one quick scenario to get you thinking about it. So let's dive into it. So the Address Confidentiality Program, for those who are less familiar, is a program that was created in 2008 here in Colorado. So it's a statewide service, and it's free for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking and harassment. And the purpose of the program was really to be a part of a safety plan, a tool that can be a part of a comprehensive safety plan for a survivor. So there are all kinds of public records that could be accessed and made viewable on the internet or in other ways, or even just made known to an offender. Voter registration was a big way that this was happening prior to this program being created. And so it was a direct response to that and the Colorado Open Records Act, which made it that much easier for people to locate actual addresses of survivors who were fleeing and trying to stay hidden from offenders. So what we do in order for people to have that confidentiality and not have their information be publicly available is by providing them with a substitute address. So this is a legal substitute address that they can use as their home, work, and school address. We also provide mail forwarding services so that when they are using this fake address, it it doesn't disable them from being able to receive their mail. They're still able to get their mail because their mail is forwarded to us, and then we forward it on to their confidential address. We'll talk a little bit more about what that mail forwarding process looks like and some details that might be relevant for you. But those are the main two services that our program provides. And that is true for other programs. We'll talk about other programs that exist across the US, but that is the basis of being able to provide some protection to survivors. Since we have been created, we have served over 10,000 survivors in Colorado. So that is a really large number. It's always growing that we're getting more participants. And of course, we don't want that to be the case. But if there are people in need, we want to be able to help them. So we currently have over 4,200 active participants. They are spread out all across Colorado. And it's likely that even if you're in a rural area, that you have at least a few ACP participants that are residing there and trying to use their substitute address. So it's important to be aware of that and what that could look like. Let's see. Let's go on to the national view. So I mentioned there are other states with similar programs. All of the states in green have an existing program, and it may be called an address confidentiality program or a safe at home program, but they're going to offer those same two services of a substitute address and mail forwarding services. However, the programs can look really different. We're really fortunate in Colorado, we have a fairly robust program. So there's places like Oregon that have one staff member and they're not able to do nearly as much outreach or enrollment, increasing awareness of state and local governments. So we're really glad to have that opportunity here. We have 9 staff members to support participants on a regular basis. Another important thing here to note is that participants are not able to simply transfer their participation from one state to another. We do all operate independently and are ruled by state laws. So if someone's coming from Tennessee's program, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically be enrolled in our program. They do need to get enrolled in our program individually and go through all that process in order to use a substitute address in the state of Colorado. And we do have contact information on our website for all of the other states that have programs. So if you do run into someone who is looking to move to another state and they want to know if that state has a program, you can always go to our website or just refer them to us. All right, so this is going to be just an overview of what the program process looks like for someone to get enrolled and to be receiving their mail. And I just want to preface the rest of the presentation with, I'm sprinkling in some of the more detailed pieces regarding our statutes, regarding how the program supports survivors to maintain their confidentiality. The whole goal really here of this presentation is to make you as an advocate more aware of what's available. What can we do beyond just give people a substitute address and forward their mail to make sure that they're really getting use out of the program and they're feeling comfortable keeping their address protected. So all of these little things will be sprinkled in throughout the presentation. But again, certainly let me know if you have specific questions. So for someone to get enrolled in the program, they do need to meet with a certified application assistant. There are some of you here who are already certified. If you're not already certified, want to be, you can do the paperwork at the end and then you can be certified to help people enroll. People do need to go directly to application assistance in order to enroll. They don't come to our office. We don't meet with people in person. We also don't determine eligibility over the phone with people. We rely strictly on our application assistants who have been trained by us to be able to determine whether someone is eligible and help them enroll if they are. So a survivor would need to meet with an application assistant, and that application assistant is responsible for determining if that person is eligible based on the statutory requirements we're about to dive into. They will provide basic program information so that person is aware of what this program can do for them, if it actually fits into their safety plan, and if it makes sense for them. If so, the application assistants are the keepers of the application. So they have that, you all will have that information. We have it now in the form of a PDF that is electronically fillable to make it a little bit easier in these COVID times. So you will have that. We don't have it on our website. We don't want people trying to enroll themselves. We want them to be going to application assistance. And then you will submit those applications to us once they are complete, along with evidence. And from there, we would process it and get that person enrolled in the program. At that point, we would take over kind of the case management work of supporting them in the program and answering any questions they have related to using the substitute address. But you are that very first face for them of the program, even though we're not, directly maybe working with each other in the same agency. We're very much in this, symbiotic relationship, and you are that first interface for them. So it's important for them to get their questions answered, whether that's through you or through you reaching out to us. Once an application is submitted, our office, our agency is required to process any complete application. So we don't do any extra determination of whether someone is eligible. It is completely based on whether that application has all the information that we need and has sufficient evidence. So really, you as the application assistant are going to be taking that time to make sure that this is a referral you feel comfortable with and feel is a good fit for this person. Once we get that, we will process it, make sure it's complete. We will send all the information that the application or that the participant needs, including a handbook that walks them through some of the processes we're going to talk about when they interact with state and local government agencies, and forms that they may need to update us. Everything we try to give them ahead of time. It can be a little overwhelming, but they need that information to use the program correctly. So we send that off to them. And then they need to change their address information in order to start receiving mail to that substitute address. Nothing happens automatically. It is going to be strictly by updating each individual agency that now they have this address, the substitute address, rather than whatever they had previously. Once that happens, we'll receive the mail. We'll cover a little bit more of what that looks like, but ultimately we're sending it off to their confidential address. So let me check. I know I've seen some things popping into the chat. Okay, I think that's all good. All right. So moving on to mail. Oh no, it skipped all of the images here. Okay, well, I guess we're going to have to just move on. So with mail, this process of what that looks like is, like I said, someone is going to get enrolled in the program. They're going to have their substitute address, and from there they need to update all of the individual entities that have that information. Doing a mail change or a mail forwarding order, or even a change of address through the United States Postal Service. This is one of the tools that it's important for people to know when they're getting enrolled, that they don't need to do a change of address with USPS. So oftentimes people may have already done that if by the time they come to you as the application assistant. In that case, you can have the participant call USPS, or you can do it online, I believe, even to have that mail forwarding order canceled or modified. Because what happens if someone does a change of address anywhere in the United States because it's a federal agency and because they have a national database. The United States Postal Service has a national database that has all of the changes of address in there and can be made publicly available. If someone is putting in their confidential information, then that is no longer protected. So when someone is coming to you to get enrolled and they're not sure what to do with their mail, ask them if they've done a change of address, and if so, figure out how you can work with them to get that modified or canceled so that they're not, putting their information out there when they're getting enrolled in the program and thinking that they're going to be protected, because that would be a huge hole in their safety plan. So main thing there, avoid changes of address through USPS for multiple reasons, but especially for the confidentiality piece. The mail forwarding, so we're required to forward all first class mail, and I'm putting this out there just because if you are going to choose to renew or get certified, this is on the quiz that you'll have to take later, which is that we will forward all first class mail, legal mail, certified mail, but we do not forward junk mail. So all of the kind of magazines, coupons, things like that that are going to be considered junk mail is getting shredded. We are not forwarding that on. We're only going to forward that important mail that has specific information for the participant in there. And we do not forward packages. So that's important information for participants to know ahead of time, and we will work with them to navigate that if they have issues with not receiving packages or something like that. But some of the extra tools that we have for increasing their feeling of safety, increasing their confidentiality when they're in the program is this safe label name on this slide, which is an optional name that they can choose. It would be a fake name that they choose that we can place on their outgoing mail. So that is only going to be for the purposes of leaving our office and going to their actual address. So only for outgoing mail being forwarded by us. It is not a legal name change. It is not a name we should be receiving mail in. It is just in case they have a fear or concern that someone might access their mail from the time it leaves our office to the time it gets to them. So an example of what that might mean or what that could look like is if an offender is a mail carrier, and if that survivor doesn't know what that offender's route is, and if there could be overlap, then putting a fake name on their mailing address is going to prevent someone from seeing it and connecting their actual name with their actual address. So that's something that is available to people if it is useful for them. And similarly, you can use, or participants can use, a completely different mailing address. So once they're enrolled in the program, we do need an actual address, but it doesn't have to be their physical location. So they can use things like a PO box or a parent's house for receiving mail, something that's not where they're actually located. So if for some reason their mail is compromised when we forward it on to them, it is not going to be received where they're going to be located. So if it's a PO box in a different town or a different city, then that's an extra level of protection as well. With receiving packages, of course, we live in an age where people want to receive packages. We can only make exceptions for things like license plates and bank checks. Those things we will forward. Otherwise, all packages will be returned to sender. So if people need things like medications, or they just want to receive things through Amazon, then they can do things like use a fake name on their mailing information going to Amazon, again, to disconnect their actual name from their actual address if they're receiving that Amazon package at their home. But I know also Amazon has lockers that people can go pick up from. So safety planning around that is another option, and a way for them to still be able to receive packages and not have to be as worried about their information getting out. So we have that information in the participant handbook if they ever needed to revisit it. But that's just another kind of safety planning tool that people can utilize while they're in the program to make sure they're covering all of the, or checking all the boxes, I suppose. Here is just a quick example of what mail looks like when it's forwarded from us. It's repackaged and has their either their safe label name or their actual name and their actual address or their mailing address. So there's a lot of options here. Oh, I think the screen may have frozen. Let's see if I can do it manually. It doesn't want to move forward. I'm going to stop the screen share for just a second and see if that helps. Everyone see that? Maybe if you can use the thumbs up reaction, I can make sure everyone can see the screen now. Awesome. All right, so we're moving on to eligibility. This is probably where we'll spend a good chunk of time, which is to debunk some of the myths about who's eligible for the program to begin with. So I've heard that people have thought that you need to have citizenship as a survivor in order to enroll in the program, and that is false. That's not something that we ask about. It's not something we're concerned about with enrollment. So as long as someone meets all the other eligibility requirements, then we are not concerned with their citizenship status. I've also heard that a survivor has to have a protection order in order to be eligible. And we accept a variety of types of evidence because we understand that survivors aren't always comfortable going to law enforcement or going to the courts for assistance. So the protection order would count as evidence if someone had it, but it's not required. And that's the same for police reports. So it doesn't have to have been reported to police at all in order for someone to be eligible. Third one is that a survivor must have moved in the last 90 days or they are not eligible. So this one gets a little tricky because we do have the statutory requirement that says someone has to have moved in the last 90 days, but it also says, or plan to move in the future. So because of that last part of the statute, which we'll show in the next slide, we can accept people who maybe they don't have, maybe they didn't move in the last 3 months, but at some point they will move and then find benefit from the program. So there is no time frame associated with the future move. It's really just to get at whether someone is going to eventually have a new address, because if they've been somewhere longer than 90 days, then it's likely that their information is already readily available. And that's something that you can check with them by going online or whatever you have in front of you, whether it's checking the Google or checking the internet for their information and see what you can find. But as long as someone is not in a location that they're not planning on moving from ever, like they bought a home a year ago and they don't plan to move, they want to remain there for the foreseeable future, then that person would not be eligible. Otherwise, people who are in either temporary housing situations like transitional housing or a shelter or even a rental situation, they're going to move eventually. And it's just going to take talking to them so they know that they won't see the benefit of the program until they do move. But it doesn't make them ineligible if they're outside of those 90 days. And then the last one is that applicant must have permanent housing in order to be eligible. So I kind of just covered that in this last myth, but they don't need to be in any kind of permanent situation. They do need a residential address. So it doesn't have to be permanent, but it does have to be considered a residential address. We consider shelters to be residential. We consider hotels to be residential, transitional housing, even if they're just staying with a family member, that's a residential address, or family member or friend. It doesn't have to be permanent. We can get them enrolled as long as we have a residential address on their application. So diving into the statutory requirements a little bit more, we've kind of highlighted some of the important pieces with debunking and addressing those myths. But these are the 4 things actually written in the ACP laws that are required for eligibility. So with the first one, being a survivor of actual or threatened domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So you can see that it's actual or threatened, so it doesn't have to have already occurred. There doesn't have to be an incident, doesn't have to be reported already, nothing like that. It's really that kind of linked to this fear for safety. Has something happened to cause this person to feel that they need to have their address made confidential? So domestic violence is probably the most common type of victimization that we have in terms of our participants, but stalking is a kind of catch-all for our program participants. So we want to make this program as accessible as possible to those who need it. So stalking can get people who have experienced harassment because they witnessed a crime, or maybe it's elder abuse, so it doesn't technically fall under domestic violence, the definition of domestic violence that we use in our statutes, but stalking and harassment can grab all the other people who have legitimate reasons for needing confidentiality, but wouldn't be able to be served if it was just domestic violence or sexual assault. So keep that in mind. There's no extra requirements related to stalking if they don't have domestic violence or sexual assault. That was a question I got recently from an application assistant, whether it need to be recurring or if they needed to have relocated multiple times. None of that. There's no extra information needed. So as long as they fit under one of those categories, then that works for us. Second piece is that they fear for their safety. So that one is a little bit more intuitive and based on your interactions with the applicant. So you can ask whatever questions you need to gauge whether this is something that they really need to be protected, or is it just someone who wants to keep their home information off the internet because they want privacy? Because certainly that's legitimate that people want privacy in this day and age, but that's not enough of a reason to be in our program without that element of victimization or potential victimization. Relocation, I think we covered pretty well, but again, they have to have moved in the last 90 days or plan to move in the future at some point. And that's because if someone has been at a location for an extended period of time, their information is already readily available or potentially already readily available through different means. So getting in this program doesn't redact information automatically. It doesn't erase all the information on the internet. So it's important to know that new address, having a new address recently or in the future, is what's going to help make this program useful for them. And then the last piece is evidence. So I mentioned police reports, protection orders, those are going to be eligible forms of evidence, but we can also accept things like letters from victim advocates that have supported this person. We can accept a letter from the actual application assistant who is helping this person enroll in the program, if that application assistant is comfortable writing a letter for them. So again, we know people don't go to law enforcement all the time. It's not safe. It can exacerbate things. So we want to still be able to support those people. So that's why we have a variety of means of evidence, and we'll revisit that towards the end as well. Any questions on evidence? If you want to pop into the chat, take the time to check in. All right, then we will move on. Okay, so in terms of protections for participants, I'm just going to go through this a little quickly. Put it all out there. We've got confidential information and not confidential information. You can read through those bullets. The main thing that we're trying to keep confidential is someone's actual physical address. So all the things associated with that are included. I do want to highlight at the bottom of each of these lists, you have records created prior to 90 days or within 90 days prior to enrollment. So this is directly related to our statute that says any public records created within 90 days before the person was enrolled in the program are eligible to be redacted. So this is another little sprinkled in safety planning tool that is available for our participants. So if they get enrolled in the program, but they created a police report maybe a week ago or even a month ago, and they gave their actual address because that's all they had at that point, they can go back to that police department, have that information redacted under this statute. So that'll go as far back as 90 days. Some places will go beyond that if you ask. So it's worth having the participant ask if they can have more information redacted to see what that agency is willing to do. But at minimum, those 90 days before getting enrolled are protected and can be used and leveraged to have information kind of pulled in and redacted as much as possible, again, to boost the confidentiality of this person in the program. State and local governments in Colorado, or state and local government agencies are required in Colorado to accept the substitute address. So that's all of these places listed, plus all the other state and local government agencies not listed. These are just the ones that interact with our participants most often. So some things I wanted to highlight, some things that are a little bit new for us, which is exciting, is with law enforcement. We've always given guidance for people to show their authorization card if they are filing a police report, or even if they have a police officer respond in person to some incident, show their authorization card and have their substitute address placed on those reports, whatever related reports there are, so that if they're released in the future, they're only going to show the substitute address. One kind of challenge we've had for a long time is 911 calls, because if someone is calling for 911, it's usually an emergency and they might need assistance directly at their home. And that means they need to provide that information to a dispatcher. They can't, say I'm at this substitute address, but I'm not really there, and not tell them where they're at. But that information then goes into that database for the dispatchers are using, and it's different based on the location in Colorado. But we have worked with a dispatch coordinator in the state who has helped come up with some guidance that has been dispersed amongst all of the communication centers in Colorado, guidance that will not only inform dispatchers of the program, but also give a little bit of a potential process that they can use for doubling back, making sure that people's information is protected, as long as that participant is able to, after the incident, after the 911 incident, call back and let that police department know that they are in the program and that record needs to be protected. So I don't have all of the details on the nitty gritty because we don't have access to that database, but there is a process out there now to help support participants who do need emergency assistance, but also need confidentiality with asking for that assistance. So that's exciting that we have that now. Some other things, we have the ACP voter registration process, which is a good way to be able to still be engaged with elections and voting and not have their information made public. So that information is useful. And then this is something that this is the authorization card zoomed up so that you can see what this looks like. This is important for participants to have and to show to state and local government agencies whenever they're asking to use their substitute address. They will ask to see this. So it's important that they have this card, and that's issued to each participant in the program. And then this is something that we don't usually go over as much, but it is really useful for participants and advocates to know is available if you are supporting a participant, someone who has maybe multiple court cases open. There is a statute that states that if a participant is requested to disclose their address information in court, it has to be in line with this statute. So you can see this statute listed here, 2430, 2111. Before compelling disclosure of a participant's actual address, a court must find that the disclosure is required in the interests of justice, that the potential harm to the participant is outweighed by the public interest in the disclosure, and that no alternative will satisfy the necessity. So they're supposed to make a finding. The court is supposed to make a finding, whether it's a written order or verbal order. That is what's outlined to still protect participants who are going through court cases and might need to keep their information protected. So this is something that if a participant is in the situation and a judge is asking them to disclose their address and they don't know about this, they might simply feel that they need to provide their address. But if they're able to have a little bit of time, maybe it's a written order requesting them to provide that address, it really would be in their benefit to seek legal advice or legal representation to be able to go through and see whether this was actually met and whether that request was solid. Because if not, then there is potential option for making an appeal of the order, appealing the order because it wasn't in line with this statute, or even making a complaint of misconduct by the judge. Because certainly we hope that judges know all of the things that there are to know about the program, but that's not always the case. And we don't want participants to feel pressured to disclose their address and put themselves at jeopardy if it's not being done correctly. So that's important to be aware of. Real property protections, I also mentioned in our synopsis, so we'll cover a little bit more about this. When people are buying a home or buying land, there's a lot of different hands in the pot. There's private companies, there's state and local government agencies involved, the clerk and assessor. And because of that, it makes this process a little bit limited. So there are protections that participants can ask for and make that request to the county clerk and assessor that their information is not placed on county websites or accessible through the internet. But because of the different hands involved in that purchase, including private companies like title companies, plans, banks, mortgage companies, they're not required to abide by ACP laws. So they're not going to be mandated to keep any information confidential. So it's probably good for people to seek legal assistance if they are going to be purchasing a home. There are some other options for them to potentially buy the house with a trust or a business so that it's not directly associated with their name. But that's information that really is on a as needed basis. So we don't get it too often, but if it comes up, give us a call and we can help go through that. Another thing to be aware of is this is for participants in the program as well as people who are not in the program. But you, if you are an application assistant or become an application assistant, would be eligible to write a letter for someone to break their lease prematurely if they are a victim of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and fear that being in that location will cause them harm. So that's something we have a handout on. We'll send it to you, but it is a tool that you have as an application assistant or someone going to be an application assistant to help support survivors across Colorado. So private businesses, they're not required, as I mentioned in the previous slide, to accept substitute address, but it is someone's legal home, work, and school address. So people can use it pretty much on any kind of document. They can use it for employment purposes. They can use it for rewards cards, for signing up for human services, any kind of private companies listed on there. They can use it for. There might be some challenges and we can work through those, but it's better for them to create the pattern of being at the substitute address by using it whenever someone asks for their actual address. So I had this break built in, but we're already close to our end time, so I'm going to skip over it. I apologize. Maybe you got a little break while I was having technical difficulties. All right, and this last portion is about application assistance. So if you do go through the application assistant process, then your role is providing information about the program to those who you feel might need that information, whether it's now or later, because most people don't know that this program even exists. So at least letting them know it exists, whether they're eligible right now or not, is gonna be useful to them. So you're providing that information. You are the ones determining eligibility, you're assessing for program fit, and you are submitting the applications directly to us. This is not something that you're required to fill out a certain amount of applications each year, or that you have to meet with everybody who is interested in the program. It is really an additional service that you're providing to your clients, to the people that you're serving. And if you have the time to meet with them, if it makes sense for you, then go ahead and do it. But if not, you have no obligation to meet with everybody and to submit all the applications. So just to be aware, you have some autonomy there. In terms of eligibility or beyond eligibility and thinking about assessing for someone's fit, these are just some positive and negative indicators. You all will get the slides after so you can revisit this since it's a bit of information. But really what you want to know is how much information is already available about someone's actual address when they go to enroll, how much of it can be redacted, and is it going to be a lot of work to do that? Really just nailing that down and thinking, is there a future move so that they don't have to do all that work to undo the information, but rather they get to start fresh. So those are important things to know. And whether someone can navigate the program, because it is a little much to take in all at once. So make sure you talk to them about that and make sure that they are comfortable asking questions and reaching out to us if they have any issues. This is just a brief overview of the actual application. So now it's 3 pages. It used to be 2. This is also available in electronic format. We tried to make it more inclusive and also more straightforward. So you can see it's mostly demographic information on this first page. We need their legal name. Here's the spot for safe label name if they choose to use that. And then one of these additional things that is available to people that might help boost their confidentiality is co-applicants. Anyone who is residing in the same household as the primary applicant is eligible to be enrolled in the program. So that can be children, it can be parents, it can be spouses, roommates even. If they are 18 or over, then they need to provide consent, of course, and sign the application to get enrolled in the program. But that helps make sure that they're closing any loopholes in case an offender finds out that they're living with someone. Maybe they find out they're living with a new spouse and that spouse is not using a protected address. That information is now publicly available and that offender can use that to find the person they're looking for. So if that spouse is also in the program, that information is protected and that's not a way that they can compromise their confidentiality. So co-applicants can be listed. Court orders, we do send court notices when someone is enrolled in the program if they have open court cases related to allocation of parental responsibilities, dissolution of marriage, or child support. So really those domestic relations cases are the only ones that we're considering here. But if they have those cases, we're looking it up and we are sending notices directly to the courts so that participants are not missing any information that they need. So this is an added level of protection that we are proactively getting to those courts, letting them know here's the substitute address. So any court-related documents that may have been missed in the transfer of that substitute address from the old address are going directly to the substitute address and getting to the participant. So that's why we ask about that. And then we have all these participant affirmations on the end of the application for them to make sure they agree to, they can sign the application. We can accept electronic signatures. So if that is needed, we can use that to get someone enrolled. So they can sign it with a stylus, sign it with the Adobe DocuSign, whatever they have can be signed. And then application assistant sign at the bottom, that's their referral for that person. Evidence.
Nikki, just really quickly, there was a question that came in the chat box asking how folks get more paper applications as well as access to the online application.
Yes. So if you are going to renew or you're getting certified for the first time, then those applications will be in the electronic starter kit that I send you. If you are not going to do any of that and you just need more, you can email me. My information will be at the end of this slideshow and should be made available to you, and I can get that information to you. I can email you the online application and I can send more paper applications as well. Great, thank you, Maria. So evidence, the main points here are that it doesn't matter whether their incident occurred in another state or it occurred 10 years ago. We're not needing a specific type of evidence. We just need some sort of documentation to support that what this person is alleging that they've experienced a certain type of victimization. So that can be a protection order from another state. It can be an incident that occurred 20 years ago and now their offender is getting out of prison. So they have a renewed sense of fear that they need to address and protect themselves with. So all those are going to be eligible. And as I mentioned, a letter from an application assistant can also count. Or from a victim advocate. So if they don't have anything else, they can always get a letter from a victim advocate or you as the application assistant. So we had this scenario, we have 5 minutes. So I'll just ask for those of you who are still with us, this is a quick scenario to start thinking about what issues could come up when you're looking to enroll someone. So if you want to read through this and then just provide some comments in the chat, whether you think they're eligible and a good fit for this program based on the information you have. For some reason, I can't see where the chat went.
I can read those for you as they pop up. So far, we don't have anything coming up. I think folks are processing a little bit. Someone did say yes.
Okay, so that they would be eligible. So they recently relocated. they're staying in a shelter, yes, so they don't have to have permanent housing. They have a shelter address that we can use. And since they didn't report, we might need a different kind of evidence for them. So whether it's a letter from you as the application assistant or an advocate, certainly you could make the argument that they'd be eligible. You might want to know a little bit more information, but that's a good start.
Yeah, and that's what was popping up. Someone did mention, looks like they would need to provide some evidence, had someone say a letter, and that's the conversation that's happening in there.
Okay, awesome. All right, well then I'll leave the last few minutes for questions. Let me move these slides. The next steps are completing the training quiz, and you have to pass that with 100%. We have an agreement form that we also need from you. Whether you are renewing or getting certified for the first time, both of those things are going to be required. And then once I get both of those, I can process you and get your electronic starter kit sent out to you by email, so you can have the actual applications on hand and other additional handouts that are helpful, and you can start helping people enroll in the program. And we've got 2 minutes for questions. I'll move over to the next slide for my contact information. So again, if you need materials, you just have questions, maybe you go through the quiz and you're not sure on one of the answers, go ahead and send me an email, and I am happy to walk through that with you. But thank you all for your time. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we talked a little bit more about some of the statutes that can support people once they're in the program to actually make use of this confidentiality that they get with the substitute address, because we see a lot of people not being aware of these specific statutes, court disclosures, or even getting their mail forwarded correctly, not using USPS, and that makes this whole program kind of useless, unfortunately. So we want people to know that there are lots of tools they can use to make the most of the program.
Nikki, is there a limit of a staff that can be certified from your office? Let's say for my agency, is there a limit that you will have on one person, or you guys are okay with more than one person to be?
That's a great question, and I think a lot of people have that question. We can have as many people as wanted at one agency. We're not limited in any way. I think there have been in the past a lot of agencies who kept it with one person, and if that works for them, that's fine. But the more, the better, especially in victim services where people are moving a lot, people are transitioning out of positions, transitioning out of victim services. So the more people you have, the less you have to worry about not having anyone all of a sudden to support this person who needs to get enrolled.
The other question I have, Nikki, is that if you were certified to be the ACP in one agency and you transfer, the certification is for 2 years, but let's say you get a different job, go to another agency, will that be transferred with you, or you lose it because you're no longer in that agency?
Yes, it can transfer with you as long as you are still providing direct services, and you notify us. So if we don't know, of course, we can't make that update for you. But if you send me an email, send our main ACP email to let us know, then I can send you the form that you fill out to update that information, and it'll remain your designation until your 2-year time period is up.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you, Agatha.
Awesome. Well, we've had a lot of folks put in the chat box. Thank you. A lot of great information. And so I want to echo that as well. Thank you for spending some of your morning with us, Nikki, to share this information, and hopefully folks are interested in becoming application assistants. You will receive those links in the follow-up email, so keep an eye out for that from me. In that, you will also get a copy of the slide deck, a PDF slide deck of what you saw here today. Any questions that you have that pop up that you didn't think of during the session, you can always reach out to Nikki. Her email address will also be included in that follow-up email. So look for that. We hope to see you at future webinars with us. We have a couple more webinars scheduled this month. One actually on Friday. It's an information session for folks who are interested in becoming interpreters who are bilingual in English and Spanish. That's May 14th. So this Friday at 11 a.m. Also, if you're interested in restorative justice and how you might learn a little bit more and move towards a restorative justice framework, we have a webinar May 25th at 10 a.m. That's going to be presented by CICASA board member and a staff member called Understanding Where We've Come From and Where We Can Go, Moving Toward Restorative Justice Framework. So keep an eye out for that again, and we hope to see you at one of those two or both of them and other future webinars that CICASA hosts. Please remember to fill out the survey that we'll be sending. Again, that's very helpful and important to us. And thank you all for making time this morning to be here with us and for your interest in the ACP program. Thanks all. Thanks, Nikki. We'll see you all
Thank
soon.
you.